A little girl in a wheelchair asked a billionaire a simple question that changed his whole life forever. She asked, "Where can I buy a dad?" What happened next shocked everyone and became a powerful story about love, hope, and a race against time. This is not just about money or power. It's about finding family when you least expect it. Dear friend, what you're about to experience is not just a story. It's a deeply human journey about loss, resilience, and the quiet, unexpected ways love finds us when we need it most. If this is your first time here, I invite you to drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing your voice. And if you're someone who believes in second chances and the hidden strength of ordinary people, and in stories that stay with you long after they end, consider subscribing and tapping the bell icon. We share moments that matter. Thank you for being part of this one. Now, let's begin. Jonathan Drake had spent his entire life surrounded by gleaming skyscrapers, luxury cars, and boardrooms filled with people who either feared or envied him. At 62, he was the embodiment of American success, a self-made billionaire whose name was synonymous with innovation and ruthless deals. But as he sat in the back of his chauffeured car on a rainy Seattle morning, the doctor's words echoed relentlessly in his mind. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Weeks, maybe days. It was a sentence that even his billions couldn't buy him a way out of. He had built an empire, yet as the car pulled up to Seattle Children's Hospital, a strange emptiness gnawed at him. His assistant had scheduled this visit for a charity PR event. Another photo op, another opportunity to polish the image of a man who behind his tailored suits felt more like a ghost than a mogul. Jonathan's Italian leather shoes clicked down the hospital's pediatric wing, each step punctuated by the antiseptic scent of sterilized halls and soft murmurs of nurses tending to fragile lives. He had rehearsed what he'd say, how he'd smile, but the carefully built facade crumbled when he heard the squeak of small wheels approaching from behind. Turning, he saw her, a little girl, maybe 5, her hair the color of fresh cream eyes, impossibly blue, sitting in a bright pink wheelchair adorned with cartoon stickers peeling at the corners. She was pushed by an elderly woman whose silver hair betrayed a lifetime of hardships. Their eyes met, and for the first time in decades, Jonathan felt something unfamiliar, a stirring in his chest. Emily Parker blinked up at him with a mixture of curiosity and innocence only a child can possess. "Mister," she said, her voice as clear as a bell, "how do you buy a dad?" The words slammed into Jonathan with a force that took his breath away. Buy a dad? He almost laughed, but the way Emily clutched the tattered stuffed rabbit on her lap turned the question into something heartbreakingly raw. Emily's grandmother, Agnes, gasped softly. "Emily?" she scolded, her voice wavering. But Emily kept her eyes on Jonathan, waiting, hoping. Jonathan felt the polished floor beneath him tilt. Here he was, a man who'd spent his life amassing enough wealth to buy anything Plains Island's power, yet faced with this child's simple question he was utterly powerless. His mind spiraled, the family he'd lost to ambition, the son who hadn't spoken to him in 20 years, the wife who'd walked out whispering, "I can't compete with your empire." And now, standing in a fluorescent-lit hospital hallway, a little girl's question cut through every layer of armor he'd built around his heart. Emily reached into a tiny purse strapped to her wheelchair and pulled out a handful of coins and crumpled dollar bills. "I have $27.15, she said solemnly. "Is that enough?" Jonathan's eyes burned. For the first time in his life, he realized what it meant to be truly poor, not poor in money, but in connection and purpose. He crouched down despite the stab of pain radiating from his abdomen, bringing himself eye level with Emily. "Why do you want to buy a dad, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice unsteady. Emily's gaze flicked to her grandmother, who looked away, eyes shining with unshed tears. "Because Grandma is tired," Emily whispered. "She says she might go see Mommy in heaven soon, and Nurse Carla says every kid needs someone to take care of them. So if Grandma goes, I need a dad to stay with me, but I don't know where to get one." Agnes wiped her eyes with trembling hands. Jonathan was struck by the matter-of-fact way Emily talked about death, the casual acceptance no child should have to bear. In her words, he heard not only desperation, but profound courage, the kind of courage that reminded him of his mother who'd worked 3 jobs to keep him clothed and fed. It stirred something deep and aching. He glanced up at Agnes, who managed a weak smile. "She's been saving coins ever since she heard me tell the doctor. My heart's not what it used to be," she explained softly. "She thought if she saved enough she could buy a dad before I—" Her voice broke, and Jonathan felt the sting of his own tears. He had arrived expecting a routine charity visit, but he found himself at the center of a storm he never saw coming. In the corner of his eye, Jonathan noticed a nurse discreetly watching them, tears brimming in her eyes. There was something universally powerful in that hallway, a child's hope meeting a dying man's regret. He took Emily's small hand in his large, calloused one. "Emily," he said, voice thick, "you don't need to buy a dad. A dad's job is to find you. And maybe I've been looking for you too." The words surprised even him. They felt foreign, yet truer than anything he'd ever spoken. In that moment, his phone buzzed with another message from his assistant, a reminder of meetings lined up, contracts, waiting board members demanding his presence. He silenced it. For the first time in decades, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Emily's eyes lit up with cautious hope, and Agnes exhaled a shaky sigh as if releasing years of worry. The hospital loudspeaker crackled with an announcement, but to Jonathan the world had gone silent, except for the soft sound of Emily's wheelchair wheels as Agnes began to roll her granddaughter toward the elevator. Emily twisted back to look at him one more time. "Will you come back?" she asked, voice small. Jonathan hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I will. And next time I'll have an answer." This small exchange was enough to fracture the icy shell around his soul. He realized he had been surrounded by people who feared him, envied him, but none who needed him for who he was, only for what he had. But Emily needed something different, a father. And in that need he found the first glimmer of a purpose greater than contracts and stock prices. It was a purpose he'd almost forgotten existed. Real stories, like the one of Jerry Wyndham, who adopted his granddaughter at 70 after his daughter passed, prove that age doesn't limit our ability to love or protect. These stories show us that sometimes the right question asked by the smallest voice can awaken the deepest truths in us. Emily's question was a lightning bolt through Jonathan's carefully curated life, and he knew he couldn't walk away. Because buying a dad was impossible, but becoming one was not. And so, with his world turned upside down by a question he never thought he'd hear, Jonathan resolved to do something he'd never done before, open his heart. He took one last look at Emily disappearing into the elevator and promised himself that whatever time he had left would not be spent counting days, but making them count. He didn't know yet that his decision would spark a battle for Emily's future, a race against his own mortality and a fight with forces he couldn't imagine. But in that hallway, he found the seed of redemption. And as the hospital doors closed behind him, the next chapter of this extraordinary story was just beginning. The days after Jonathan Drake's encounter with Emily felt both fleeting and endless. Each morning he woke to the same bleak reality. The pain in his bones was sharper, the fatigue deeper, the countdown on his life ticking faster than the steady beat of his heart monitor. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Emily's face, the determined little girl who saved spare coins to buy a dad before her grandmother's time ran out. The image ignited a fire in him he thought long dead. He couldn't stand by while the days slipped through his fingers like sand. He had to act, and he had to act now. Jonathan's first call was to a high-powered adoption attorney specializing in emergency cases. She told him bluntly that the process normally took months, sometimes years. When he insisted, she asked the obvious question, "Why now?" He hesitated, his voice barely a whisper, as he admitted, "Because my clock is running out faster than hers." The attorney was quiet for a moment before replying, "Then let's start today." Meanwhile, Agnes tried to shield Emily from the urgency boiling just beneath the surface. She continued their routine of reading bedtime stories and sharing giggles, but at night Agnes lay awake, haunted by the ticking clock of her own failing heart. She worried what would happen if both she and Jonathan were gone before they could finish the impossible task of giving Emily the home she deserved. One rainy afternoon, as Jonathan sat with his attorney in a wood-paneled conference room, the door swung open and a tall man in an impeccably tailored gray suit strode in with an air of arrogance. His name was Dr. Leonard Grant, Emily's longtime surgeon. Leonard greeted Jonathan with a cool nod before turning his eyes to the attorney. "I heard about the adoption," he said, voice smooth as ice. "I can't in good conscience allow a man with days to live to take custody of Emily. She needs stability, not a dying hero." Jonathan felt his stomach twist. He had known Leonard only as the skilled surgeon who'd cared for Emily since infancy. He never expected the doctor himself would become a challenger, or that he harbored his own plan. Leonard leaned forward, speaking directly to Jonathan with unflinching certainty. "You think this is about charity or redemption, Mr. Drake. But Emily needs a future, not a fairy tale ending." The words cut deep because they rang with a cruel truth. Jonathan wanted more than anything to leave Emily with love, but could he guarantee she'd have what she needed after he was gone? Agnes's health was worsening. She had fainted twice in the past week alone. He wondered if Leonard was right. Yet, as soon as that thought crossed his mind, he remembered Emily's bright eyes and her unwavering trust. That memory hardened his resolve. The tension between the two men escalated quickly, their private battle spilling into the quiet hospital halls. Agnes arrived one evening to find them arguing outside Emily's room. "Stop it, both of you," she cried, voice cracking with desperation. "This is not about either of you. This is about Emily. She doesn't need another fight. She needs hope." Tears streamed down her wrinkled cheeks as she clutched her chest, her breaths coming in shallow gasps. Seeing her struggle, Jonathan rushed to steady her, while Leonard stood frozen, the weight of his own ambition clear on his face. A nurse appeared to help Agnes sit, and Emily peered from the doorway, eyes wide with fear. "Grandma, what's wrong?" she asked softly, rolling her wheelchair closer. Agnes pulled her into an embrace, her voice trembling. "Nothing, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay." But the lies tasted bitter in her mouth. Emily deserved honesty, but how could they shatter her innocence with the brutal realities of adult conflicts? That night, Jonathan couldn't sleep. He stood by the window of his penthouse suite overlooking the glittering Seattle skyline, reflecting on everything he'd built and everything he'd lost. His empire had given him power, but it couldn't buy forgiveness, time, or the guarantee of Emily's safety. He thought of Jerry Wyndham's story again, a man who stepped up for his granddaughter despite his own declining health, giving her a foundation of love that outlasted him. Jerry's courage inspired him to see this fight through. Determined, Jonathan called his attorney first thing in the morning. "Draw up an agreement that names Agnes as the primary guardian," he ordered hoarsely, "and make me her co-guardian. That way, even if I don't make it, Emily's future will be secure. The attorney warned him that Dr. Grant had already filed a legal petition questioning his competency, hoping to stall the process. But Jonathan's resolve only strengthened. The urgency of his situation demanded immediate action. Meanwhile, Leonard's motives became murkier. A hospital administrator quietly informed Jonathan that Leonard had recently faced malpractice accusations at another facility. The administrator's voice was low but urgent. "He's a brilliant doctor, but he's hiding something. Don't let him near that little girl." The revelation shifted the battle from a tragic clash of good intentions to a fight against a man who might not have Emily's best interest at heart. Emily, blissfully unaware of the legal storms brewing, spent her days drawing crayon pictures of her dream family herself, Grandma Agnes, and a tall figure with gray hair and kind eyes labeled Dad. When she showed it to Jonathan, his heart nearly broke. "Did I draw you good enough?" she asked shyly. He crouched beside her, voice cracking as he replied, "You made me perfect." In moments like that, the rightness of his decision washed over him like a tide. He realized that while love couldn't promise forever, it could make every day worth living. It wasn't the length of time together, but the depth of love that defined a family. There are thousands of grandparents and older adults in America today fighting to keep children safe when the system seems to move too slowly. Their struggles remind us that a child's security often depends on someone refusing to give up when the odds are stacked against them. Jonathan now understood that lesson intimately. As he left Emily's room one evening, he paused outside the hospital chapel. Stepping inside, he sank into a pew and whispered a prayer not for himself, but for Emily's tomorrow. A moment later, his phone buzzed with a text from his attorney. Dr. Grant had escalated his legal challenge, forcing an emergency hearing that could decide Emily's fate in days. The race against time was no longer a quiet struggle. It had become a battle neither man could afford to lose. The courtroom was cold and silent, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions swirling inside Jonathan Drake's heart. It was the day the past would no longer stay buried, a day when secrets long hidden threatened to unravel everything he'd fought to protect. The judge's gaze was sharp, her tone no nonsense as she addressed the parties. But beneath her stern exterior, she knew this case was about more than legal technicalities. It was about a little girl's future and the fragile hope tied to one man's final days. Dr. Leonard Grant, poised and confident, rose to present his case. He spoke carefully, outlining his concerns about Jonathan's health and the risks of placing Emily in the care of a man so clearly facing the end of his life. But then, with a steely glance, Leonard dropped a bombshell. He revealed documents suggesting that Jonathan might be more than just a wealthy benefactor to Emily. He claimed Jonathan was in fact her biological grandfather, thanks to a past affair with Emily's late grandmother. Jonathan sat frozen, the weight of the accusation settling like a stone in his chest. The truth was tangled in decades of silence and regret, a past affair that had fractured his marriage, a daughter given up for adoption under a veil of secrecy. He had buried those memories deep, fearing they would undo the empire he built and the man he had become. Yet now his past was no longer just his burden. It was a weapon used against him. Agnes Parker's hands trembled as she clutched Emily's wheelchair. The revelation was overwhelming, but more than that, it was painful. For years she had been Emily's rock, shielding her from the world's cruelties. Yet now the walls around their little family were crumbling. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered to Emily, "Sometimes the people who love us the most have secrets too." Emily, sensing the heaviness but too young to understand fully, simply reached out and squeezed her grandmother's hand. The courtroom drama revealed another side to Leonard as well. As attorneys dug deeper, whispers surfaced about his professional conduct, allegations of ethical violations, and misuse of confidential medical information. A hospital administrator torn between loyalty and conscience quietly informed Jonathan's legal team of Leonard's past troubles. It was a cruel twist. The man claiming to protect Emily might not have her best interest at heart. Jonathan wrestled with a storm of emotions. He felt anger, betrayal, but also an acute sadness. The man who once saved Emily's life now threatened to unravel her future. He thought about real families torn apart by secrets, stories he'd heard of children displaced by revelations of unknown relatives, or cases where love had been shadowed by betrayal. The fragile trust between Emily and those who claimed to protect her was at risk. In the quiet moments away from the courtroom, Jonathan sought solace in reflection. He realized that while the truth can sometimes wound, it can also heal. A family built on lies is brittle, but one built on honesty, even painful, can endure storms. He recalled the words of a social worker who once told him, "Children don't just need security. They need truth they can hold on to." Agnes, too, found strength in the chaos. She sat beside Emily one afternoon, brushing the little girl's soft curls and explaining, "Our past doesn't define us, sweetheart. What matters is the love we choose to give every single day." Emily smiled, her resilience shining through despite the upheaval around her. As the court session drew to a close, Jonathan stood his resolve renewed. He understood that the battle was no longer just about legal custody or financial security. It was about reclaiming trust, confronting the shadows of the past, and building a future where Emily could thrive without fear. But even as he prepared to fight on, a new uncertainty loomed. Leonard's challenge had shaken the foundation of Jonathan's plans, and the court's decision would not come quickly. The days were slipping away faster than ever, and with each one the stakes grew higher. Jonathan knew he had to be ready for whatever came next, not just as a guardian, but as a father willing to face the darkness for Emily's sake and for the hope she represented. The day of the hearing arrived with a heavy weight pressing on Jonathan Drake's chest. His body, frail from weeks of battling cancer, felt weaker than ever, but his spirit burned brighter with the fierce determination to secure Emily's future. Agnes sat beside him in the courtroom, her presence a silent pillar of strength, while Emily waited quietly outside under the watchful eye of a nurse. The stakes couldn't have been higher. This was more than a legal battle. It was a race against time to protect the little girl who had unexpectedly become the center of Jonathan's world. As the judge entered the room, hushed, Jonathan steadied his voice, knowing this was his moment to show that love and commitment outweighed any ticking clock. He spoke about Emily not just as a child in need, but as his daughter in every way that mattered. His words were raw and unpolished, but they carried the weight of a man who had found purpose in his final days. Emily deserves a home filled with love, he said. Not just a house or a bank account, but the kind of family that stands by you when life gets hard. Across the courtroom, Dr. Leonard Grant watched with cold calculation, ready to challenge every claim. But Jonathan's attorney was prepared, presenting evidence of Leonard's past ethical concerns and his sudden interest in Emily that seemed driven more by control than care. The judge listened intently, weighing the arguments with the gravity the case deserved. Outside, Agnes nervously gripped Emily's hand. She whispered softly, "We're almost there, sweetheart. Just hold on." Emily's bright eyes flickered with hope, and a child's innocent trust that the world would somehow turn out right. Jonathan's health took a sudden downturn during a recess. He felt a sharp pain and collapsed against Agnes's steadying hands. Paramedics rushed in, and for a moment fear clenched everyone's hearts. But Jonathan's resolve didn't waver. Even in the hospital bed, he sent messages, signed documents, and insisted on being part of every step. His fight was not just for custody, but for every precious moment with Emily. The courtroom reconvened with Jonathan present, though weaker. Agnes rose to speak, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Your Honor, a man's worth is not measured by the days he has left, but by the love he gives in those days." Her heartfelt plea moved many, reminding everyone that family is built on more than legal papers. Then came an unexpected turn. Margaret Weller, Jonathan's estranged sister, stepped forward. Having watched the battle from afar, she offered to become a co-guardian for Emily, promising to provide the stability and love that would outlast Jonathan's time. Her presence softened the room, adding a new layer of hope. Real stories mirror this kind of family resilience. Across America, countless children are raised by extended relatives who step in when parents or guardians can no longer care for them. These kinship adoptions often bring comfort and continuity that children desperately need. Jonathan's plan now mirrored that truth love multiplied through family willing to carry the torch. As the judge prepared to deliver her ruling, Jonathan looked toward the doorway where Emily sat, her small hands clutching a stuffed rabbit. Despite his pain, he smiled, knowing that whatever happened next, he had fought with everything he had for the little girl who had given him a reason to fight. The judge's words were solemn but hopeful. She granted Jonathan temporary guardianship with provisions ensuring Agnes and Margaret would care for Emily when he was gone. It was not the end, but a new beginning, a fragile victory won through love, sacrifice, and unwavering determination. Jonathan's eyes welled with tears as he heard the decision. The battle had taken everything from him, but it had also given him something precious, a chance to be the father Emily deserved. Agnes squeezed his hand, their shared tears speaking volumes. Later that evening, as Jonathan rested in the hospital, Emily rolled into his room. She smiled brightly, her innocence untouched by the legal struggles around her. "Dad," she said simply, "we won right." Jonathan nodded, voice breaking. "Yes, sweetheart, we did." That moment, pure, unfiltered love was worth more than any fortune. Their journey reflected a powerful lesson. Family isn't defined by time or perfect health, but by the willingness to show up, to love fiercely, and to protect those we hold dear no matter the odds. For Jonathan and Emily, the fight was far from over, but they faced the future together, bound by a love that would never fade. Jonathan Drake's final days were a quiet testament to the love he had found in the most unlikely of places. Though his body weakened, his spirit remained fiercely protective of Emily Parker, the little girl whose simple question had altered the course of his life. The walls of his hospital room were filled with soft whispers and the gentle presence of Agnes and Margaret, who had become steadfast guardians not only in law but in heart. Before his illness had taken its deepest toll, Jonathan had insisted on recording messages for Emily, not just for now, but for all the milestones she would face in a future he might never see. Sitting upright as best he could, he spoke directly into the camera, his voice steady despite the weight of his fading strength. "If you're watching this, it means I've gone to heaven sooner than we hoped. But know this, the 5 days I spent as your father were the most meaningful of my life. You gave me a gift I never expected, the chance to love and be loved." The recording ended with a smile that lit his tired eyes, a smile that promised he would always be near. Emily watched the video weeks later in the quiet of her bedroom at Agnes's house. Her small fingers traced the screen, her eyes wide with wonder and a touch of sadness. "Dad," she whispered the name, feeling right on her tongue. "I miss you already." Agnes sat beside her, pulling her into a warm embrace. "He's still with you, Emily. In every story you tell, every laugh you share, and every step you take." Jonathan's legacy extended beyond their small family. Unknown to Emily, he had quietly established a foundation in her name to support children with disabilities across the country, ensuring that many others would benefit from the love and opportunities he had wished for his daughter. The foundation's first children's center opened in Santa Monica, where Emily would visit years later, her story inspiring countless others. As Emily grew, she faced challenges with the strength Jonathan had always seen in her. Physical therapy sessions became milestones of triumph, and each new achievement was celebrated not just by her caregivers but by a community that rallied around her. At 8 years old, she proudly showed off her wheelchair dance moves to Margaret and Agnes, her laughter filling the room. Watching a video of Jonathan cheering her on, she whispered, "I did it, Dad. I'm dancing for you." Their story echoed the lives of many families who find strength in love despite adversity. Like Dick Hoyt, a father who pushed his disabled son through countless marathons, Jonathan and Emily showed that love knows no limits. It transcends illness, time, and even death. Their bond became a beacon of hope, proving that family is defined by heart and commitment, not just biology. Agnes often told Emily that Jonathan's love was a treasure she would carry forever, a gift far more valuable than any fortune. "You are his greatest legacy," she would say, "because love is the one thing no illness or time can ever take away." On quiet nights, Emily would speak softly to the stars, sharing her day, her dreams and her fears with the Father who watched over her from heaven. "Dad," she'd say, "thank you for finding me, for being my dad, even if only for a little while." And in her heart she felt his answer, a love that never ends, a presence that would guide her through every chapter of her life. Jonathan Drake's journey was not one marked by the riches of his empire, but by the wealth of his heart. In the brief days he shared with Emily, he discovered what it truly meant to be a father, not in years or legacy, but in moments filled with unconditional love. His final gift to Emily was not just a home or a trust fund, but the knowledge that she was cherished beyond measure. Their story, born from a child's question and a man's redemption, reminds us all that sometimes the greatest legacies are those written not in dollars but in love. Jonathan Drake's story is a profound journey of transformation, love, and redemption, a testament to the power of human connection, even in the face of life's harshest realities. A man who had spent decades building an empire of wealth and influence found his greatest purpose not in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in the fragile hands of a little girl named Emily Parker. Their paths crossed in the sterile halls of Seattle Children's Hospital, where a simple yet piercing question from Emily, "How do you buy a dad?" shattered the barriers Jonathan had built around his heart and set him on a path he never imagined. What followed was a race against time, fraught with legal battles, personal revelations, and unexpected challenges. Jonathan's terminal diagnosis made the urgency undeniable. Yet it was his unwavering commitment to Emily's future that drove him through every obstacle. He faced opposition from Dr. Leonard Grant, a man whose intentions were clouded by his own ambitions, and navigated the complex maze of custody laws, all while battling the physical toll of his illness. Amid the turmoil, Jonathan discovered the true meaning of family, not defined by blood or fortune, but by love, sacrifice, and presence. Emily, despite her young age and physical challenges, taught Jonathan invaluable lessons about resilience, hope, and the purity of a child's heart. Agnes and Margaret, the strong women who surrounded Emily, exemplified the strength of extended family and community support. Together, they formed a network of love that transcended legal papers and medical reports. The story culminated in Jonathan securing guardianship of Emily, ensuring that she would be cared for and loved beyond his lifetime. His recorded messages, foundation in Emily's name, and the legacy of love they shared became symbols of hope that reached far beyond their personal story. Jonathan's final days, filled with warmth, laughter, and profound connection, remind us that the greatest riches in life are found not in wealth, but in meaningful relationships. From this powerful narrative, we draw profound ethical lessons that resonate deeply in today's fast-paced world. Jonathan's journey teaches us about the importance of compassion, the ability to see beyond ourselves and respond to the needs of others, especially the vulnerable. It reminds us that love is not measured by the quantity of time, but by the quality of presence and the sincerity of our actions. In a society that often values success in terms of material achievements, this story invites us to reconsider what truly matters. Forgiveness and redemption are also central themes. Jonathan's life was marked by mistakes, regrets, and lost relationships, yet he found the courage to seek redemption through love. This reminds us that it is never too late to change, to make amends, and to open our hearts to others. The story encourages patience and perseverance, qualities that help us navigate life's uncertainties and maintain hope even when circumstances seem bleak. In practical terms, we can apply these lessons by nurturing the relationships around us with empathy and commitment. Whether it's family, friends, or community members, investing time and love into these connections enriches our lives and those of others. We can practice forgiveness, understanding that everyone carries burdens and imperfections. Moreover, we can learn to embrace vulnerability, recognizing that true strength often lies in our willingness to be open and authentic. Jonathan and Emily's story also highlights the significance of standing up for those who cannot stand for themselves. It challenges us to be advocates for the vulnerable, to use whatever resources and influence we have to make a positive difference. This call to action extends beyond individual acts to fostering inclusive communities that support and uplift all members, especially children and the elderly. As you reflect on this moving story, I invite you to consider how you might bring these values into your own life. How can you show compassion today? Is there someone in your circle who needs your forgiveness or support? How can you be a source of love and hope in your community? These questions are not just philosophical. They are the foundation of a meaningful and fulfilled life. If Jonathan and Emily's story touched your heart, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel. Your support inspires us to continue sharing stories that celebrate the human spirit, stories that inspire, heal, and connect us all. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. Together, we can build a community that values kindness, resilience, and love above all else. Stay tuned for more heartfelt stories, and remember, sometimes the smallest voices ask the most important questions, and through them we find the greatest answers.